Ghost.
Ghosts!
Toast.
Ghosts!
What's up, Flick fans? Welcome back to the channel. Apple TV Plus has a brand new movie starring Ana de Armas and Chris Evans. Let's talk about it. So Cole falls head over heels for Sadie, but makes a shocking discovery that she is a secret weapon. Before they can decide on a second date, Cole and Sadie are swept away on an international adventure to save the world. This movie is written by Rhett Reese, Paul Warnick, Chris McKenna. Rhett Reese and Paul Warnick you would know from Deadpool. Dexter Fletcher was the director of Rocket Man. He's the director of this film. This film is rated PG-13 for sequences of strong violence, action, brief, strong language, and sexual content. Here's my relationship with this movie prior to seeing the actual film. I saw the trailer and I said, okay, well, let's see what happens. Her wig is interesting. And then I saw the first couple of clips and I thought to myself, they have no chemistry. In this, there's nothing. But you can't really judge a movie based off of a clip because you have to see the clip in context, yada, yada, yada. You know that. So the beginning of this movie, it moves at an interesting pace. It tries to be your standard rom-com, but when you have Chris Evans and Ana de Armas, they're kind of like, it feels like they're too big for this movie, but at the same time, they should be here. It's a strange feeling. That being said, because of where Cole is in his life right now, there's an interesting vibe that he's giving off to where she doesn't necessarily reciprocate, but there is a sweetness to their relationship, even though what they do at the beginning of this date is a little awkward. I mean, you've probably seen the staircase scene, but there's a lot of things wrong with that. Not just their chemistry. It's the direction, it's the weird editing, it's the pacing. And that editing, unfortunately, is present all throughout the movie. The action scenes are as generic as you could ever imagine an action scene in a rom-com to be. It reminds me of those romantic comedy mixed with action movies that we were getting back in the day. And I say back in the day, I'm thinking Night and Day, which in my opinion is a better looking and paced movie, but it's that same type of relationship. But in this case, we have Sadie, who is the secret spy.
Secret?
When all is revealed to Cole and when things take that turn, that for me is when I actually started to feel like these two actors were in the same room together, because I actually started feeling a little bit of chemistry. When they're bickering, it was much more intriguing, engaging, and emotional than when they are both on the same page. And it's just like, it's romantic, but it's weird. But it's romantic, but it's weird. It just didn't really feel natural. And then when they're in these crazy circumstances and all is going in that direction, then I'm like, okay, it's outlandish, it's ridiculous. No way, really, either of them would survive this, but she is made to be like this spy, and we'll get into the act. Actually, we won't. We're not going to get into that because that's kind of a spoiler, but things get a little topsy-turvy, and it ends up to where Cole has to go on this journey, this adventure with her. At first, he was forced to, but then he's like, you know what? I don't have a choice in this situation. Sadie, make sure of that. So that, for me, is when the story started to become a little bit more interesting, and the dialogue between them, for some reason, gets better at that point. I think this was meant to be more of an action movie than a rom-com at its core, because that's when it was actually conveying something to grasp onto, but they keep going back to this relationship that, for me, never really went anywhere. It felt so repetitive, and it feels like neither character for the majority of the movie is actually learning anything. They're just doing what the script tells them to do, and that's go get the thing because the thing is important and it's going to save the world, and the world's in trouble and it's in jeopardy, and it's standard action movie jargon, mumbo jumbo.
As a response to allegations.
It reminds me of like an off-brand Mission Impossible mission, to where they're like, yeah, you gotta go get the rabbit's foot, except this time it's this thing, and that's a thing that we've seen 1,000 times, but we're going to do it anyway because it gives our characters something to do. And that's how I felt about Ghosted. Our characters needed something to do at all times, and what they're doing, it would be better if the direction was better, and I'm still stunned that Dexter Fletcher was the director here, because I think Rocket Man's awesome. I think that movie is incredibly directed. It's beautiful. I think the performances are incredible. In this movie, Chris Evans is basically playing Chris Evans. Ana de Armas is basically playing, and I don't feel a ton of chemistry between the two, except for when they're arguing. So how does that make sense? Then you have Adrian Brody in there as the villain, Lizzie Broadway as, I believe, Chris Evans' sister, a couple of famous people here and there, and then you get one sequence in the middle with a crap ton of cameos. I mean, cameos galore, but all of those cameos spawn from something that Chris Evans has done before. And while I really enjoyed that scene, to me, that was the most entertaining part of the movie because it's like, oh, look at that guy, and look at that guy. I started to see the bigger picture here, and it really upset me. All throughout this movie, Chris Evans is spouting out dialogue that I've heard somewhere before, and there's one moment where he says one line, and I'm like, oh, that's what this is doing. And then you see the cameos, and you're like, oh, okay. And it bums me out because Chris Evans was in Snowpiercer. Chris Evans can do it. I thought his performance in Knives Out was awesome. But he's falling back into these generic roles that are kind of relying on what we know him from the most. And that's basically what this movie is in a nutshell, along with being extremely generic when you look at it as a romantic comedy. And it bummed me out because I'm like, Chris Evans is better than this. I know a lot of people want to say he's not because he's done this so much, but he is better. Knives Out, Snowpiercer, he can do it, right? Ana de Armas, her last 4 movies since, I believe, No Time to Die, not great. I get it, she was nominated for an Oscar last year. I can't take that away from her, but the movie itself was not great, so I want to see her in better roles. And then I see the movie that they're in, one of the most generic plots. The chemistry didn't work all that well. There's nothing special about the filmmaking or the action sequences or the action scenes. I've seen all of that before. You can just put it in a barrel and shake it up. And it's not that it's the worst time I've ever had while watching a movie, because I like these two actors. And because of that, there were moments where I was like, oh, that was cool, that was interesting, but it always could have been more. And I think that's my big problem is I just felt like this was a lackluster short change of an experience.
Jesus Christ.
Before I give you my score, have you ever been ghosted? If you have a good story, please tell me. I need something to laugh at because I don't know if this movie... Well, I guess there were 1 or 2 moments. Ghosted relies on these 2 talented performers to deliver, even when the dialogue and action sequences are mediocre at best. The chemistry never fully feels believable, and the plot is generic. As a, television, watch it in the background, throwaway type of generic action movie that comes on TNT in 3 years. I don't know if it's going to do that because it's an Apple film. I think it may slightly entertain some people. So again, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but when you have these actors, all of these actors in there, and Dexter Fletcher, I just expected a lot better, but maybe my expectations were too high. Let me know in the comments. Were they too high, or am I just a curmudgeon-y old man? I'll see you soon.